This meeting is being recorded.
Hi, everyone. I'm Juliette Berger. I'm president of Washtenaw Audubon Society. I'm glad to see all of you here. It's a nice big crowd. I'm super excited. You can't even imagine how excited I am to hear Ben's talk tonight. We have Ben Lucking, who took 5 of us, and 6 including himself, to northern Ecuador at the end of January and early February. And I was on that trip, and so was Diana and Joe, who are on this call, and Andy Detling, I see, also is here. So we're pretty excited to hear Ben's talk, and I know you all will be too. First, I want to talk about diversity. We have Washtenaw Audubon has a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement, and we do like to read it at the beginning of each program, and that's to let everyone know that they're welcome. The birds Washtenaw Audubon pledges to protect differ in color, size, behavior, and geographical preference, and countless other ways, as we honor and celebrate the equally remarkable diversity of the human species. Washtenaw Audubon considers the work of inclusion, diversity, and equity a top priority moving forward. And we hope that in doing so, we can bring new creativity and energy to our work in Washtenaw County and beyond for birds and people alike. Now, respect, inclusion, and opportunity for people of all backgrounds, lifestyles, and perspectives will attract the best ideas and harness the greatest passion to shape a healthier, more vibrant future for all of us who share our planet. And we believe that protecting and conserving nature and the environment transcends political, cultural, and social boundaries. As an organization, we're committed to increasing the diversity of our board, volunteers, members, and supporters. As an organization, Washtenaw Audubon strives to create a sense of community where all people can feel safe to explore nature and experience the wonder of birds. We respect the individuality of each member of our community and welcome all without discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, age, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, disability, national or ethnic origin, politics, veteran status, or any other status. All are welcome to bird with us and learn with us and to share our passion for birds and the environment. So I was hoping Mike would introduce Ben and let us know what programs we have coming up before you introduce Ben. Can you do that for me? Thank you. You're muted still, Mike? You need to unmute yourself. I hope you can. Yes, there you are.
Got it. Yep.
Yep.
Programs coming up next month, May. Come on, Mike. You can do it. Help me out. Who is my roommate on the voyage to Antarctica that never happened?
Oh, you've got Andrew Sturgis coming.
Yes, the fabulous Andrew Sturgis.
Oh, he's wonderful. I can't
wait. Photographer extraordinaire will give us his pictures he took in Antarctica back in January, February. That's May. June, Don Chalfant will give one of his inimitable talks on who knows what. That will be revealed on the website at some point.
Yeah. And let me interject for just a minute. Our June program is going to be really important for everyone to attend because we plan to have a question and answer session after Don's program to address concerns people have about potentially changing our name from Washtenaw Audubon to something else that doesn't include Audubon, since we have a lot of information that I didn't know that has come, lots of articles and research has come out lately about some of the despicable acts of John James Audubon that we would like to distance ourselves from. So we'll have a chance to talk about all of that, and we'll eventually have a vote of the membership, and that will really start at the June meeting, so make sure you plan to be there. That'll be the 3rd Wednesday in June. Okay, Mike, sorry about that.
And finally, in September, Ramather Murthy will give us a talk and show us pictures of his birding in the deserts of India.
Cool.
And that's it for now.
And you get to introduce Ben.
Oh, wow, indeed. Ben has been a friend of Washtenaw Audubon for many years, led us on a bunch of field trips, taught us a lot about birds. He graduated from Dexter High. He went to the University of Exeter and graduated from there. And now he's running around North and South America, at least, conducting tours. And he's going to give you a little taste of one of those tours in just a moment. Welcome, Ben.
Welcome, Ben.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mike. Hello, everyone. So yeah, as Juliet and Mike was saying, I've got a presentation basically. So this January, of course, we had our Washtenaw Audubon trip to northern Ecuador with 5 of us, and 6 including me, birding basically a cross section from sort of the western cloud forests of the Choco on the west side of the Andes, across the Andes, and to the east to Amazonia, basically. And then I spent another 2.5 months after that in Ecuador, guiding at San Isidro Lodge. So I have a few extra photos from that, but for the most part, most of these photos are just from the Washtenaw Audubon trip in January. And so without further ado, let me share my screen here one moment.
Fabulous.
All right. All right, here's a group on top of Papiacta here. Can everyone see that? All right, Juliet, that's looking good. Yeah. All right, I will assume that is okay. All right, so our journey began in Quito in the Central Valley in northern Ecuador with the little bird pen over here. So around Quito, and obviously you have to sort of start there since the airport's there, but it's actually got a pretty unique habitat relative to the rest of northern Ecuador. It's much more arid, it's much drier, and it's pretty high elevation as well. So it's sort of this high elevation, dry, scrubby sort of habitat. And so a lot of the birds, almost all of the birds that are present there, not so many species, but almost all of them are actually birds that we don't see elsewhere on the tour, just due to habitat changes. So stop number 1 was this. So there's a disused horse racetrack actually on the northwest side of Quito. And it's well known among birders for being sort of the only spot in northern Ecuador, and really one of the few spots in the world where you can regularly see this bird, white-tailed shrike tyrant. It's a pretty large sort of flycatcher, very localized and rare for seemingly no great reason that I know, at least. But so that was our first main stop where everyone got to get out and bird, and we managed to see 2 of these great guys fly in along the hillside. So that was quite exciting. Good start to the trip. And then in that same habitat, there's quite a few hummingbirds. The dominant species there is sparkling violet ear, these large violet ears, but this hummingbird is possibly the most spectacular in that environment. The black-tailed train bearer, named, of course, for this brilliant tail. They're actually quite common in the right habitat, and we saw quite a few around the racetrack and elsewhere in northern Quito. So great little guy there. And from there, it was just a short drive to our first hotel here at El Crater. It's sort of perched right above this crater called Pululawa, which of course has some special and unique birds. Let's see. So our first mission here was, of course, to descend into the crater to go and look for some of these birds. And as well as the birds, we found some great views. I'm sorry. Yeah, sort of the crater on the right here. Andy's on the right here is looking towards, filled with clouds. The clouds sort of filter in and out of the crater. It's pretty incredible to watch. And this is sunset from the hotel there above the crater. These I took on a past trip actually out the window of the hotel there. Sort of gives you an idea of sort of the really diverse landscapes. You've got this cloud dependent, sort of not quite truly wet, but wetter bamboo forest in the crater itself with some agricultural land. And then you've got drier, almost like arid deserty scrub a 5-minute drive away. And then of course you can also see snow in the distance. So it's kind of what makes Ecuador so good, is just this incredible diversity of landscapes and scenery, and therefore birds, of course. So down in the crater itself, there's a few good birds. This guy, so first of all, the main bird in the crater is actually an antpitter, this tiny little round thing called Lamabamba antpitter. And this one in the crater is actually a disjunct population from the rest of Lamabamba's antpitter's range, which is primarily in Peru. And it's sort of separated by pretty much the entire country of Ecuador from the rest of its population here, and is limited entirely to this one little crater that you can just see from the hotel, this whole population, which is quite special. But there's also lots of tanagers and mountain velvet breast and lots of other good stuff in there, white-tailed tyrannulates. Yeah, and also a whole lot of owls. So the bottom of the crater, it's sort of this patchwork of very low intensity agriculture, which brings out a lot of, it must bring out a lot of rodents, I would imagine, and small mammals and stuff, because the diversity of owls is pretty unprecedented, to be honest. There's barn owls, there's burrowing owls, there's Stygian owls, there's buff-fronted owls, white-throated screech owls, rufous-banded owls, and there's a really pretty long list of owls that have been recorded there. Short-eared owl's been recorded there, and I don't know of many sites with more owls than this, so it must just have an incredible amount of prey. So this is Andy walking in front of me on the road there in the middle of the night. Only Andy and I were crazy enough to go down there at 1 a.m. So it's quite an arduous drive down into the crater, down this twisty, turny dirt road. And I think everyone was tired from the day. So only Andy Loco over here, as we called him, and myself went down, and we wandered around the crater for a couple of hours and managed to initially find bandwing nightjar, which I think is the next photo. Yeah, so this is not from that night, but this is a bandwing nightjar that I photographed there another time. But we got out the car and we found this bandwing nightjar singing. There were quite a few, but we managed to spotlight one in a tree. And I hadn't brought my camera out of the car at this point, so I told Andy to run and grab my camera while I held the light on it and kept an eye on it. And while Andy was going back, this huge owl, a Stygian owl, is a very rare species, really, widespread but rare. This huge owl just comes out of nowhere and attacks this nightjar. It didn't catch it, but it was unbelievable. So I followed it sort of as it flew around us in the light. It's really pretty spectacular. It's sort of bill snapping and all sorts. It was very exciting. And a first for me, actually, Stygian owl. So that was really, really nice. And then Andy and I managed to track down a couple more of those guys, as well as some calling white-throated screech owls, which is a lot of fun to top off the night. And then, so our next destination the next day was about 45 minutes or maybe an hour or so away down the slope. And even though it's a relatively short drive, the landscape down here is completely different. So you're dropping about 1,000 meters of elevation, and getting out of that central valley with this dry air, and you're getting sort of the Pacific slopes, humid air. And so this area is just blanketed in this beautiful cloud forest. And so the destination here is a place very famous among birding in South America, Refugio Paz de las Aves. And so we arrived there that afternoon and immediately went down to they have a lek of Andean cock of the rocks, which is of course this beautiful bird here. These strange birds, so some of you may have heard of a lek before in the context of grouse, so greater prairie chicken or sharp-tailed grouse. All of these birds, they lek, which is during the breeding season, they go out into a field usually, the grouse, and sort of display to each other all in one big group, usually every morning. And Andean cock of the rocks are another lekking species like the grouse, but they actually lek in sort of loose, pretty large groups up in the trees, usually in the canopy, although since they're in cloud forest, which is pretty mountainous usually, you can usually get on sort of a slope adjacent to them and get eye level with them in a lot of spots like this. So that's how these photos are taken. So yeah, we got some really nice looks at these Andean cock of the rocks. Here's another shot. And then, so the Andean cock of the rock actually comes in two I think there's actually a third subspecies in Peru, but in Ecuador it comes in two subspecies. There's an eastern and western subspecies. So you'll notice, if I go back here for 1 second, the western subspecies that we saw here is this bright red, and it doesn't really have much of an eye ring at all. Whereas this eastern subspecies is this bright orange with this really bold yellow eye ring. And yeah, so very interesting geographical differences. A lot of the species in Ecuador and in South America as a whole is sort of split, either as subspecies or species by the Andes, since it's such a massive barrier to evolution. And here you can kind of get a sense of what a lek looks like here. This big sort of loose group of displaying males in a tree. Usually they're all males in these groups, and I've seen the biggest lek I've seen is maybe 40 or 50 birds, which is pretty incredible. And yeah, so you can see 5 or 6 here, but they'll spread over a relatively large area and make these bizarre sounds that I suggest you look up later. It's very strange and very loud. Sort of suits the bird, really. But yeah, you don't see any females, which are much browner, but still have a bit of a crest and are still quite big. There's usually maybe 1 or 2 females, even in a very large group like this. And so also at Refugio Paz de las Aves, that evening we managed to see these wonderful black and white owls that inhabit the area behind the cabins. The sky was illuminated, not by flashlight or anything, but then in this case actually by the street light there, because he's foraging in the street light for moths. So a bit of a lazy owl, and then he roosts about maybe, I don't know, 10 or 15 meters behind the street light every night, so, or every day. So has a nice little short distance to the food. Then the real stars of the show at Refugio Paz de las Aves, and what made it so famous in the first place, was this show of ant pittas they have every morning. So the owner there, Angel Paz, he initially, so he found a giant ant pitta, which I'll show you in a moment, but he found this ant pitta on his farm, and sort of got to know this bird. The ant pittas, they have this sort of inquisitive nature. They will interact with you quite a lot. And so it's sort of natural to be for you to kind of be interested in sort of seeing them. Like they have just a cuteness to them. And so anyway, I guess he got to know this one individual giant antpitta, and he started feeding it worms. And then at one point, a group of tourists, a group of birders from the US came and saw this antpitta. Well, they saw Angel Paz, and he said, do you want to see this bird? I see you're, interested in birds. Do you want to see this strange bird I have? And they go back there and they see this giant antpitta, which at the time was barely known to science, and just almost no one had seen. So of course they were shocked, and from there it all began. And now you can go and see 5 antpitta species in a day most days, and that is what we did the next morning. So this is a yellow-breasted antpitta. And then here we have a mustached antpitta. You can see his little mustache there. Had a pair of those. And then we have chestnut-crowned antpitta. This is perhaps the most common antpitta to encounter without going to one of these feeding stations like Angel Paz has. They're quite common in a lot of the Andes, but nonetheless, they are possibly one of the most beautiful in my opinion, and they're actually Angel Paz's brother's favorite of the antpittas there. So there you go. And then there's this really cute little antpitta. This guy's just the size of sort of, I don't know, a warbler almost. It's just a tiny little round guy, an ochre-breasted antpitta. And they have this little dance where they shake back and forth the whole body, and they're pretty much constantly just shaking back and forth. So Angel named this one Shakira is his name for this individual. He has very personal relationships with all of the antpittas there, which is always very funny to see. And it comes to a whole new level with this guy, which is the giant antpitta, of course. So this is actually Maria, the giant antpitta. And Angel knows these giant antpittas very, very well, and is often able to just sort of, he'll throw little bits of wood or like sticks and stuff into the forest at this particular spot he has. And depending on the day, he might have a new spot sometimes, but he'll start throwing these little bits of sticks and stuff, and he'll yell, Maria, Maria, venga, like, come, Maria, come, in Spanish. And out pops this giant antpitta and walks right out to him, ready for its worms. It's a very strange birding experience, not like anything really else anywhere in the world. Definitely, different. And so here's another photo of Maria here in her full glory. So ochre-breasted, whereas a really tiny antpitta, giant antpitta is quite a lot bigger. I'm trying to think of a good comparison. I know it's a pretty hefty bird. And of course, outside of feeding stations like this, antpittas in general are just incredibly secretive and just will stay obviously walking around in the understory of forests in pretty low densities usually. So very, very hard to encounter outside of this. Here's the group with Angel and his brother here, all celebrating after a fantastic morning of seeing all the antpittas. And outside of the antpittas, there's also a few other birds. So we had this crimson-backed woodpecker, loads of hummingbirds, of course, as there are everywhere in the Andes. So this is the purple-bibbed white-tip here. All right, and so from there, our next destination was Mindo, which you can see this little bird pin I've got here. So a little bit northwest of Quito, sort of right on the edge of, you can sort of see where it flattens out into the true lowlands, and then just on the edge of the Andes in the foothills, basically. And so this is our base for quite a few places to go out into the lowlands a bit and get some of those, the truly incredible high diversity of the lowlands, as well as some of the special birds that are a little bit higher up in the Andes, a bit to the east of Mendoza. We did a few day trips, but this was our first bird, the first target bird here. as we entered Mindo, this Koopman zelania, not the best photo, but and a bit of a dull bird, but they are a very strange and localized bird, only recently described actually. But in Mindo, you can actually see them right on the edge of town these days, which is quite cool. So it's a sort of strange and relatively unknown species, just right on the edge of town. Right, and then with that guy, there was a few of these, a few other things. So this pale-legged horn arrow, I think yeah, it's an ovenbird species. So related to wood creepers and sort of, yeah, all of these. It's a large South American family that doesn't quite range up into North America, but these are a ground-dwelling species of that family. And then our first proper excursion away from Mindo was 20 minutes away to, what is it called? Milpe, San Jorge de Milpe. It's a nearby lodge that has, for the last few years, developed, well, they've managed to start getting a banded ground cuckoo, this just mythical bird that's, I think on eBird still only been seen maybe 190-ish times ever on eBird. So an incredibly rare world bird. But they've got this thing occasionally habituated to coming into a moth sheet, which is this this white sheet with a mercury vapor bulb to attract moths through the night. And then in the morning, all these birds come for the free insect food, basically. So it's a sort of novel variety of bird feeder, I guess. And so to get this banded ground cuckoo, we headed out there to this moth sheet that's set well back into this primary lowland rainforest there. And hiked out in the dark because you've got to be there before dawn. So about 5 in the morning or so. And yeah, so we sort of gathered in this little hide looking out over the moth sheet. And our first bird was this white-whiskered puffbird, just before it even started really getting light at all, coming into the moth sheet. And yeah, the moth sheet's what's illuminating him. And then here's another bird coming into the moth sheet, this ochre-breasted tanager. And another visitor to the moth sheet was this tawny-faced gnat wren, just a really beautiful looking, strange shaped bird. Really like them. The choco warbler. And then an Esmeralda's antbird. These are quite a special and localized species. This is the male here, and it's pretty rarely photographed, but the female was also coming into the sheet, which you can see here with this brown on the wings. And until this, I don't think there was maybe 1, maybe 2 other photos on eBird ever of the female of the species. So it's not very common to see these guys like this. So it's quite exciting to see them right in front of us at the moth sheet like this. And these buff-rumped warblers, which are very popular with everyone, with this really bright rump, sort of flick their tail a lot and sort of behave like a water thrush, kind of, I guess. They're very strongly associated with running water, usually, these guys. Here's the crowd gathered at the moth sheet, so you can see this. The sheet is the moth sheet. And yeah, we're all waiting for the banded ground cuckoo. And here is the banded ground cuckoo, which did keep us waiting for quite a while. I was getting quite worried, to be honest. It was about 7:30 or so in the morning when it eventually came, and it felt quite sunny and hot by then almost. So I was really starting to doubt whether it would come in. I'd missed it once before, so I was, yeah, getting worried, but out popped this just incredible cuckoo. I know it's a almost roadrunner-sized cuckoo. Stays on the ground, just very low densities, and they follow ant swarms normally. So yeah, it's just, for me, possibly my favorite bird of the trip. Was this bizarre prehistoric looking guy. Wonderful. Here we go. It's full glory looking right at us. And when he went for moths on the sheet, he'd just sort of rip into the sheet and really, yeah, just everything sort of got out of his way. Here we all are posing with the banded ground cuckoo on the rock here. After our successful twitch of the banded ground cuckoo. All right, on the way out from the moth sheet, we also saw a few other fun birds like this female choco trogon, which is quite cool, giving good views. Joe, one of the participants on our trip, can do a very good trogon impression. Here's Joe, actually. There you go. Makes a great trogon impression. All right, and so our next stop in the afternoon was quite a bit higher up, even though, again, a short drive away, but higher up into the cloud forest with a complete weather change and a pretty much complete habitat change as well, with the main target being this plate-billed mountain toucan. You can see the plate that it's named after, this big old plate on its bill. Yeah, just truly spectacular color palette. And at a couple places now, just around Mendo, these guys come into banana feeders, which is just, it's pretty unbelievable when you see them that close. Here's a photo from another visit to that feeder. And one more. That is possibly my favorite bird overall. Just such a great color palette. So unique looking. And they're actually surprisingly, I don't know, to me, every time I see them, they look quite delicate and small for a toucan. Just these really delicate colors and intricate details. And I think it's also because you're seeing them that close that you really get such a great feel for them. And then there's also, while you wait for the plate-billed mountain toucans to come into the feeder there, there's plenty of hummingbirds to keep us occupied, like this velvet purple coronet. And this Empress Brilliant. And on the road nearby, and this is actually from another day when a couple of us went out to the road just outside of there. But since it's the same habitat, I've sort of lumped it in. And this is a crested quetzal we saw along the road there. And a cloud forest screech owl that we managed to locate after hearing it for quite some time. Tracked it down finally. All right, and then next day out from Mendo was to this place called Reserva Amagusa, which is right on the boundary of this really large reserve called Mashpi. And Amagusa, there's a sign right outside of it that says something like the best place in the world to photograph birds, something like this. And it is maybe the one place where I can say that that is no hyperbole, that is absolutely true. It may well be the best single spot in the world to photograph birds, I think. And so here's this green thorntail, one of the wonderful hummingbirds that visits the feeders there. And the female green thorntail. So a few of us elected to stay around. They have several different wonderful feeding stations at Amagusa, but they also have this really steep trail down to a river that has quite a few really rare birds. So a couple of us elected to go down to the river and chase some of the rarer stuff with the guy who owns the place there, Sergio. He's a really wonderful guide. While I stayed with everyone else at the feeders and enjoyed sort of the hummingbird and tanager show. So here's one of the tanagers visiting the feeder there. Flame-faced tanager, pretty well named. Here's another flame-faced tanager. On the western slope around Amagusa, they have this sort of yellow-orange face, whereas on the eastern slope, they have this really deep maroony sort of red on their face. Just equally striking, but in different ways. It's a golden naped tanager. And glistening green tanager. These are really quite uncommon away from the fetus Amagusa, so it's a really nice one to get, especially so well like that. I mean, seeing them, multiple of them, just right in front of our faces, yeah, it's pretty incredible. It's a black-chinned mountain tanager. Mountain tanagers are obviously part of the tanager family, but they're all much larger than the Tangara tanagers, like the glistening green. The glistening green tanagers and that sort of grouping of tanagers, they're not much bigger than warblers, even sort of a vireo-sized almost, like maybe a little bit bigger than a blue-headed vireo. Whereas the mountain tanagers, really, they can be as big as a robin at times in some of the species. But in general, they're all quite a bit larger than the Tangara tanagers. Here's some more smaller tanagers, the rufous-throated tanagers. It's feeding a young one. A very nice, easy meal there with the banana. Another one. And lots of golden tanagers. This photograph is from Colombia. I realized when I was making the presentation, I actually didn't remember to photograph any at Amagusa, but we had quite a few, and I think several of our group members got some nice photos there. But yeah, golden tanagers are always a treat. They're quite common everywhere around Mindo, really. So it's always a nice one to see. And then this is one of the more special ones, Amagusa. This is mossback tanager. And whereas they did used to 10 or 15 years ago range almost to Mindo and sort of the Milpe area, they're now really quite limited to, at least in northern Ecuador, to the area around Mashpee. So Amagusa is really by far the best chance to get them. And they come into the feeders regularly there. So a few great close encounters with them. This black-winged saltator here. And a crimson-rumped toucanet, another regular visitor to the feeders there. It's quite overwhelming just how much is actually coming to the feeders there. It's hard to know what to point the camera at times. This orange-breasted fruit eater. These don't visit the feeders there, but they're actually a really rare endemic of the Choco lowlands. So this area of northern Ecuador and southern Colombia. And but there's a lot of palm fruit. At least when we were there was a lot of palm fruit right around the areas around the feeders. So there's quite a few of them feeding on that. So we got some really nice close views of them. Here you can see some of that palm fruit they really, really like. And then this was actually taken while I was scouting for the tour, but this is maybe my favorite photo I got this trip to Ecuador. Just such a cool bird, and getting to see it eat that palm fruit was great. Really happy with that one. And another visit to the feeder is these rose-faced parrots, which again, are really quite rare away from Amagusa or Mashpee. But here they're a nice daily visitor to the feeders, and you got some really nice close looks at these funny-looking guys. And a black solitaire, another rare Choco endemic. Indigo flower piercer. This guy gave us a bit of a runaround, but we did eventually get it on the way out. Then the hummingbird feeders, Amagusa, really even by Ecuadorian standards, pretty special. You sort of just hold your hands out anywhere near the feeders and hummingbirds will just start landing all over you. So it's quite cool. This is an Empress Brilliant on my hand here. And here's a velvet purple coronet on my hand. And here's a video. Hopefully this works, but you can sort of hold these flowers and the hummingbirds will come and feed from your hand like this. Hear that buzzing. And it gives quite a nice like breeze on your hand as well from all the whirring wings. I was really excited by this, to be honest. I was very happy taking this video. All right, and so from Mashpi Amagusa, we went back to Mindo. Actually on a night walk around town, Joe, Andy, and I found this common potu fly catching in one of the street lights, which is quite fun. So, and it's obviously a nightjar species, but it's just incredible when you see them fly, how massive they are actually, and almost like owl-sized, which you don't really expect. It's wonderful eyes. Right, so after Mindo, we headed up, back towards Quito, and then across Quito into the higher Andes. And so one of our main sites there was this little restaurant actually just below Andisana National Park there. And it's called Tambo Condor. And it is, of course, famous for, you guessed it, condors. And in addition to that, though, they have some great hummingbird feeders, and it's the best site by far in northern Ecuador to get good looks at this one, which is the giant hummingbird. It's the world's biggest hummingbird. And when you see them hover and stuff, it really is, defies belief at times. And they almost, when they fly away from the feeder, they almost look like a swallow the way they fly, or a swift. It's really strange flight style, like nothing else. And here we have a shining sunbeam named for that wonderful rainbow on its back there. Another high elevation specialty there. It's got these black flower pierces as well, sort of right up here. So we saw quite a few condors as well, but none close enough for great photos, unfortunately. So here we have some of that really high elevation habitat. This is actually at Papayacto, which is our next site. Even higher up into the Andes. This is at about 4,500 meters, I think. So it was like 13,000 feet or so, at least. Maybe 13 or 14,000, I think, actually. Never mind. But yeah, so you can see it's got, we're above the tree line here. It's really quite a cold environment usually, although on our day you can see it was quite sunny and warm, actually. Very uncharacteristic, which had its difficulties, but was also quite enjoyable compared to getting subjected to the snow and hail that can occasionally form up there. But in this inhospitable environment, you do get some surprising birds, actually. Here's more of the surroundings there. You can see this road we drove up here. It's just a really beautiful views. But yeah, you got hummingbirds up there, which it seems like in this really desolate, cold environment, the hummingbirds wouldn't do so well, but several species manage to survive up there. And often at night, when it gets really cold, they survive by going into a torpor. So they're able to slow their heartbeat down and cool their body temperature to just much lower than normal, to basically survive on sort of minimal energy overnight. This is a really incredible adaptation. And of course, they're also very beautiful. This is a blue-mantled thornbill. Surprisingly not, there is another bird called a rainbow-bearded thornbill, but this one, I guess, didn't meet the criteria quite close enough. It's a pretty incredible beard it has there, but nonetheless. Here it is, flaring out its tail. We also saw a red-crested cotinga. This is actually photographed elsewhere, in Peru actually, but we got some good looks at one of these guys as we were driving up. And we also saw some tawny antpidas. This is again from a different trip there, but we did see a couple and hear quite a few of these guys up there. It's probably the easiest antpida to actually see away. And they're not as common maybe as chestnut crowned are lower down, but tawny antpida, since it's such a desolate open habitat, you actually can get them out and about a lot of the time, which is nice. These brown-backed chat tyrants as well up there. And then from there, we went a little bit lower, just below the tree line to Guango Lodge, which is in this upper subtropical cloud forest here. As you can see, this beautiful habitat. And here, there's a lot of birds. This is a slaty brush finch. And you can just see like, and the canopy here is just full of bromeliads, epiphytes, just and life is hanging on to everything in that cloud forest. It's just amazing. We got these spectacled redstarts inhabiting that habitat. And then this is one of our bigger misses actually of the trip. We somehow managed to miss gray-breasted mountain toucan. So just they're very unpredictable. They are around Guango, but they don't visit feeders. And so you sort of just have to get lucky scanning around there. And this photo I took a few weeks after the trip when I went back to Guango for a day. And within about 15 minutes, of course, had 4 of them, as of course would happen. But yeah, so we unfortunately missed these beautiful guys, but they are around Guango Lodge, which is nice. Good looking bird. The hummingbird feeders there are quite nice at times though as well. And you got these guys, these tourmaline sun angels, which we don't see anywhere else. You can see how that throat color changes just really dramatically based on the angle of the light as well. And there's also a lot of rushing water around Guango. You're right along a big river there, and there's lots of streams everywhere, and there's water everywhere. So you got birds like this white-capped dipper. This I took actually on my visit back, and so this is actually the same spot that dip was photographed more or less, but with much higher water levels. This time I missed the dipper. See that absolute torrent. Here I am wading across one of the rivers in the flooding there. And then we also were searching there for torrent duck, which we actually didn't see at Guango, but we saw at a different river lower down. These photos I took actually at San Isidro lower down. But they're adapted to surviving in that raging rapids. They're able to swim even upstream. I've seen them swim in torrents like that, which is just defies belief as well. Very powerful swimmers. And at the site we saw the torrent ducks lower down on this river. We also saw this hummingbird, a green-fronted lancebill, fly catching for insects over the river. This is a photo I took at San Isidro of the same species, but I was just hovering over the river. And here we are driving down that little side road to the river there, having a bit of fun. Diana and Joe being real troopers there. And here's the river where we had the torrent duck actually. Really spectacular landscape. And this area, and so this next area we're going to here is sort of nestled right into the eastern slope, just on the lower edge of the eastern slope of the Andes, sort of above the Amazon basin over here, but not proper highlands like Papiacta. And so here, and there's lots of stands of bamboo, which have sort of their own suite of birds. This special bamboo species, well, genus called Chasquea bamboo. There's a lot of species that are very closely linked to it, and you can actually eat it as well, as I found out at San Isidro when I was guiding there. And when they would ask, well, before telling me what it was that I was trying, they had me guess based off of some bird species. And yeah, it's so closely linked, these birds and this plant, that it's a pretty easy guess, thankfully. Here's a Rufous crowned toady flycatcher, though. These little guys are just all over in the bamboo. Very cute, round, very tiny little flycatchers. Here's another bamboo specialist, this one a bit more secretive, the streak-backed antbird. Yeah, they really don't like showing themselves, and we really had to work hard to get a pretty bad view of one in the bamboo. That you hear them a lot, but actually seeing them can be tough. Another bird around this site. So that the lodge we stayed at here was, of course, San Isidro, where I ended up guiding at later on the trip. But yeah, so this is a sickle-winged guan right by the parking lot there. And in this elevation, there's also quite a lot of North American birds that you might be familiar with from places like Nichols Arboretum. So you've got loads of Swainson's thrushes, but you also get lots of Blackburnian warblers and Canada warblers, sort of the dominant neotropical migrants there. It's very strange seeing Canada warblers just quite abundantly, actually, and sort of often hopping out and about, which you don't really see in North America. They tend to be a lot more skulky when they arrive here for whatever reason. Also have lots of hummingbirds at San Isidro as well. So you got these chestnut-breasted coronets. They're sort of the dominant hummingbird species there. And then San Isidro actually also has a moth sheet like the banded ground cuckoo site I mentioned earlier. No banded ground cuckoos at this moth sheet, but there are quite a lot of birds that visit in the morning, such as the cinnamon flycatcher. And there's a pair of masked trogons that are always showing off in front of the moth sheet every morning. Well, one time I was working in the restaurant there on my laptop, and I looked up, and they have sort of like these little ladder things over the windows to prevent birds from flying into them. And I looked up, and this trogon was just sat on one of the ladders on the window, just staring right at me. Then the real showstopper bird, I guess, at San Isidro is this owl. So this is a black banded owl, but with a caveat. It's potentially its own subspecies. Most black banded owls are low down in Amazonia. I mean, this population around San Isidro is much higher, and sort of it's a bit paler than the black bandeds that are low down, and has a very, very slightly different call. So no one really knows that it's a separate subspecies on eBird, but no one really knows very much about it. But a pair of them visit the moth sheets every night and give us a good show regardless. There's also lots of mammals at San Isidro, the most common of which is probably this black agouti. There's also night monkeys. This is, I think, gray-mantled, gray-bellied night monkey, the species, which we got to see one evening there. Very strange nocturnal monkeys, quite small as well. And then we were really lucky on our trip to get to have a good look at this guy, which is a mountain tapir, a really rare world mammal. They're endangered and really very tough to find. Occasionally they visit this, they have a salt lick at San Isidro by the restaurant balcony, and occasionally they'll visit. And we actually got lucky on our Washtenaw Audubon trip, and we managed to get one of a big male tapir come to the salt lick one night. And he stayed for about an hour, so we got some really good looks. Very strange animals as well. Here is the ridge near San Isidro. This is the Guacamayos Ridge. It's a similar sort of elevation, but a slightly different habitat. And well known for a lot of really rare birds. So this is actually there's a little overlook on the side of a highway at the start of this trailhead. And so on the trip, most of the group, we actually birded only from this little lookout. And you get a lot of stuff moving through this canopy here. But Andy, being his fantastic birder and crazy self, of course, managed to get a full day down on this trail. This trail goes way down this ridge. It's a very tough trail, so not for everyone for sure, but it has some really interesting species, which I will show you in a moment. But the main ones there, it's a regular site for this bird called a greater scythebill, which outside of here is virtually unheard of, despite presumably ranging all along the Andes. And then also Peruvian antpitta, which is extremely localized and rare, and again, has only been seen a couple hundred times on eBird ever. So lots of potential for very rare stuff there. Andy managed to get both. So the reason this trail goes down so far is actually because there's an oil pipeline down there, unfortunately. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, and so you get to see this incredible primary habitat. And it's really down lower on the pipeline. It's some of the best habitat I've ever seen, and spectacular primary forest. It feels like you're detached from like the main world, I guess. It feels like another world down there, but you also then have this reminder, of course, of sort of industry and climate change and everything down there. Just a bit strange as well. So one of the birds we actually saw from the lookout was this grass green tanager. They're quite tricky at times, and so it was nice to see a good group of them going through that. They're pretty regular, that lookout on the highway there, so that was nice. This lachrymose mountain tanager, we also managed one of these guys there. One of these really big, colorful tanagers. It's also a really good site for green and black fruit eater, this guy. And then here is the Peruvian antpitta. And this I photographed a couple months into my stay, but these birds are really just incredibly tough to see and very scarce. They're only known from 3 or 4 sites in the world. So seeing this is really special, and Andy managed to hear one down at the same site. So here is the highway a little lower on the Guacamayos Ridge, actually. Some more views of the ridge. And so now you can see this, you see the pin here, you have the E45, this is the road actually that those photos were taken on. Now the next sort of last sector here is just as you go down the sort of the end of the Andes, but just still slightly above the Amazon. So you get that lowland diversity, but there's still a little bit of elevation change and just a few different birds like that middle sort of lower elevation. One of these lower elevation species, though, that's quite common in that area is this paradise tanager. Really spectacular. Here I am in front of a waterfall along the road there. Thank you, Joe, for that photo. And here is one of the dirt roads that we bird down there. This is the Sumaco Road, which has all sorts of really great stuff along it and some really rare stuff as well. It's the view from the Sumaco Road. And you can sort of see where it flattens out down there. So we're sort of on a ridge there, but the lowland sort of spreads out beneath you. This is another common bird of the lowlands, the chestnut-breasted seed eater. And this is one of the nice surprises we had as a group along the Sumaco Road. This is a large-headed flatbill. It's a really just uncommon and enigmatic flycatcher species that's strongly linked to bamboo and sort of newly sprouting bamboo it sort of follows a bit. And so we arrived at this big bamboo patch looking for some other bamboo specialties, and we heard this song, and I couldn't for the life of me place it. Yeah, eventually managed. It's a sort of a 2-note whistle. We managed to imitate it a bit, and it came in and showed itself, thankfully. And we managed to figure out what it was, but it was quite exciting. It's quite a rare bird. So, another nice surprise we had was this black hawk eagle, another pretty uncommon lowland species. And then we had these blue-crowned trogons. Another really nice guy there. And then from there, in the lowlands, so we only actually had one day down at the Sumatra Road. From there, we just went right back over the Andes to Quito, but we left with one more stop on the way, back at a lake very high in the Andes near Papayacta again. We got these Andean gulls, which kind of like a Bonaparte's gull, kind of. But yeah, really beautiful, dainty little gull. And some Viridian metal tails were there as well. So yeah, that is all of the photos, I believe. So let me see. I'm gonna stop sharing. Here we go. But yeah, hopefully that wasn't too bad. I hope everyone enjoyed the photos and everything. And if anyone has any questions or anything, I'd be happy to take those, of course.
Thank you, Ben. That was fantastic. Great photos, amazing birds.
Thank you for trusting me with the trip, Juliet.
Of course. Did you want to talk a little bit about some of the other tours you have coming up?
Yeah, so I'm
organizing.
I've only organized. I've got the next year's Ecuador one organized, but
okay.
I still am in the other ones. I'm still in the works on. I had a couple of Colombia itineraries planned, but then I also heard a couple of things from a few friends about political situations in Colombia recently. So I just decided I would, when I have time again, I'm on my way to Texas right now doing a big day. But when I have time after that, I'm gonna have a proper look into that and make sure everything's good and sort of rearrange itineraries a little bit here and there maybe, and share those. But the Ecuador one is definitely ready to go, and I can actually put that in the chat 1 second.
So is that Ecuador trip around the same time next January of 2024?
Exactly. Yeah, it's a little bit longer. Here. Okay. I will put that in the chat here. Hopefully that link works for everyone. But yeah, so it's gonna be a little bit longer to actually get a little bit more time in the Amazonian lowlandy sort of habitats, and just generally trying to make it so that it's more focused on each area, just less moving around, I guess. Sort of, yeah, nicely spread out the moves between sites. So that should be nice. And yeah, just improved accommodation in a couple of places to make sure that everyone's pleased with the assortment of breakfast items and coffee availability and such, because that wasn't all of our accommodations this time, and most of them, but not all. So I fixed that for this time, and just a few adjustments here and there. But
do you have is that tour full, or are there still open spots on that?
There are still spots.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So Ben's put the link to his website on the chat, and so you can have.
I only just finished putting that together. So
that particular tour. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I highly recommend his tours. He is a great guide and very good about helping you see the birds and explaining about their biology and helping you understand their songs and hear things, and he keeps all the eBird checklists, which I've been told that many guides do not do that. So thank you for that, Ben. That was really nice.
eBird is sort of attached to my hand at this point. I don't think
I'm very pleased about that. I talked to Kathy Tyson. I don't know if she's on this call, but she was in Ecuador last summer.
Oh yeah.
And she said their tour guide didn't do all the eBird lists. One of the other participants on the tour did, and the tour guide did some eBird list, but because he was so familiar with some of the like trash birds in
Yeah,
quotations, some of them like the white collared Rufous collared sparrow didn't get onto the list. And
right.
you
Yeah,
know, for people who are
easily
not
done.
from
Easily done.
Ecuador, you really want to get all the birds on there. Anyway, thank you for that too. It was amazing.
Thank you.
Any other questions? You can go ahead and unmute yourselves. And let me see if there's any questions in the chat.
Hey, this is Dennis. I have a question. How useful Merlin out there?
Not at all. It really doesn't work. And it's really only supported in North America at the moment, and North America and Europe are the main regions that it currently supports. I use Merlin to like the app to record things just generally because I have things recorded in there. Not really to do the identifications, but it still will pop up the identification. So when I was doing that, I mean, once in a while it would come up with a bird that was either correct or at least close to correct, which I guess could be helpful occasionally, but it was often had nothing or was wrong with very clearly heard birds. And I know it gets like lesser greenlet, which ranges into sort of southern Mexico and stuff that has wider ranges that I'll occasionally get, but anything that's specific to the Andes or Ecuador, especially, and it doesn't have at all. But that could be to come, I'm sure. They'll have that soon enough, I imagine.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question about books.
Yeah.
If there are any that we should be getting if we want to go to Ecuador or somewhere along the Andes.
Absolutely. So my favorite guide is there's a field guide to the birds of Ecuador by I think it's Robert Ridgely, and I think Paul Greenfield is the other author. But yeah, the Ridgely Guide to the Birds of Ecuador basically is the one I would recommend. I think there's also a Helm Guide to the Birds of Ecuador that's supposed to be good, but I haven't used that one. The Ridgely Guide does also have an app, which is what I personally use. Which it also comes with also all the calls, which is very nice. Comes in handy, and it has all the same information and drawings as the book itself. And then I sort of use that in tandem with Merlin as far as like for the photo ID stuff. Merlin, you can get the Ecuador pack and it'll have all the photos for all the birds. So between those two, those are sort of the references that I use when I'm there.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else?
I'm wondering, this is Susan Kelb. I'm wondering if you took some photos of the moths that were on those moth sheets.
Oh, I very much did. So I know I didn't really when the banded ground cuckoo spot. They don't like you going out to it because they don't want anyone to mess with the ground cuckoo setup in case it stops coming. They're quite superstitious about that there. But the one at San Isidro where I worked at for a while, that was a really incredible moth sheet, and I would go down pretty regularly to just photograph them and have a look. There's a lot of large silk moths, and I've seen several imperial moths there. I think there are different species or subspecies down there, but imperial moths. And then there's just thousands of species. A lot of probably undescribed. And I don't
You
really
put them on iNet or anything?
Yeah, some of them, but I need to put a lot more. I have a lot of photos that need to go on iNet. It's a quite overwhelming amount of species there.
Yeah, I bet.
I put a few from San Isidro on iNaturalist.
Yeah. How many of them got identified? Do you know?
I think I got an identification for 2.
Okay.
And there was another moth or butterfly up in El Crater that I put on there as well. I don't remember what they're called, but yeah, I think the large silk moth was definitely one of them.
Yeah, also you sometimes get what are they called? Giant like scab beetles with these big horns.
Mm.
Very massive beetles, and those will come to the sheets as well. Those are quite cool.
Hmm.
Bob Maddox here.
Yeah.
It looks like you didn't encounter any rain there. Is it pretty much dry?
We encountered some rain for sure. It rains pretty frequently. Sort of depending on where you are in arid areas around Quito, it really doesn't rain much at all. But in any of the cloud forest or lowland sites, it more or less rains every day, but generally for short bursts or like for a couple hours or so. And rarely, if ever, does it rain all day. That's really unusual for that to happen, thankfully. But yeah, you do have to work around the rain a little.
We didn't have any rainouts though, like the whole day where we
Yeah.
had a lot of rain off and on, but we still were able to travel in the car, and then the rain would let up for a little bit. A couple of the stops were a bit less productive because of rain, but not every day.
And the other thing with the rain is a lot of the sites there's usually a hummingbird feeder or tanager feeders, and actually those are usually more lively during heavy rain. So usually if you're getting rained out, you're just spending time photographing hummingbirds and tanagers at close range, so it's really not so bad.
Yeah, it's not a bad deal.
Can't complain too much.
And thank you for not harping on how I lost my luggage and it didn't arrive for 8 days.
Oh yeah.
That colored the first 8 days of the tour quite a bit.
I had forgotten that, to be honest.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you.
I'm glad you got it in the end.
I did.
Yes.
Other questions? So how long is the tour that you're planning in next winter? You said a
14
few days longer? 14 days?
Yeah, it's 2 weeks.
Okay.
Exactly, I think. Yeah.
So we were flying out on day 14, or would have been day 13 if our plane wasn't delayed by several hours. So yeah. So just a day or two longer than what we did. Yeah.
I think the actual itinerary, it's like 2 days longer, but I think depending on what people decide on, like when they're flying back, and if it's an overnight flight and stuff, it'll adjust those things. It might be a little longer that you're actually there, depending on that, because a lot of the flights
take that
they leave in the evening and then you get there the next morning. It's most of the flights from Quito to the US.
Yeah, all of us took the 11:55 p.m. flight out of Quito.
Yeah, and that's what I took back as well. Even though I was going to Toronto. So pretty much everyone from anywhere in North America is taking that flight.
So Andy is asking if you would talk about safety and how welcoming were the local people.
Oh yeah, I've always found Ecuador very safe, and everyone's lovely in my experience there. And the coastal areas, Guayaquil and Santa Elena and all of that those areas are genuinely quite dangerous from what I understand at the moment. But thankfully we don't go anywhere near those areas, and we stay in sort of the northern Andes region, which is very, very safe and pleasant. And I wandered around a lot on my own along highways with expensive camera equipment and full view, and never had any issues yet, so should be all right.
Yeah, we had very, very welcoming local folks. Lots of folks didn't have any English, but Ben's very good Spanish speaker, and my Spanish was much better towards the end of the trip. It was quite fun if you have a little Spanish.
Yeah.
They really, the Ecuadorians really appreciate you trying to speak their language, and they're very gracious and super, super nice. We didn't run across anybody that was a local person that was unpleasant in the least. They were all sweet and very helpful and very, very nice.
Yeah, and the other really nice thing actually in Ecuador and in Colombia, I've noticed as well, people, there's a pretty wide understanding, I think, of birds and an appreciation for nature generally. Like a lot of people you just run into who are not birders, like just random farmers and stuff that I run into. If I show them a photo of a bird I'm looking for, they'll know where to look for and they'll tell me often, which is really, and people have a genuine, like really good appreciation for the nature that's all around them there, which is great. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
One of the things we had to do, as for many international trips, is make sure you get all of your vaccinations and whatnot before you go. But that was pretty easy to do.
Yeah.
It was my first trip abroad, so it was kind of a big deal for me. For everyone else, Diana, who's on this call, she was a very experienced traveler as well as Ben. Yeah.
Diana did very well.
Mm-hmm.
Ben, do you want to talk about the food at all?
Oh yeah, the food.
Oh,
I'm always so focused on the birds, but yeah, the food is amazing.
all local foods, all, locally grown vegetables and fruits, all these local dishes that you'd never had before, made of yucca and plantain and lots of trout. I guess they have a lot of trout farms in Ecuador. Beautifully prepared, very, very delicious food. Mhm.
The food was incredible. It was really, really good. And Diana is a badass. That's just stating that for the record.
I second that. Yeah. I see Jim Lowe asks in the chat about the water. So yeah, you don't want to drink the tap water in general there, but we always have lots of bottled water, and also at all the lodges and everything, they provide you with filtered water and everything, and usually bottles of water in your rooms as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's quite easy to get water all the time, but yeah, you definitely don't want to be drinking tap water. And for toothbrushing, like when you're showering and stuff, it's fine. I've never had any issues, but definitely don't drink the tap water.
Mhm.
Strong recommendation to anyone traveling in most of South America. Anyone else?
Anyone else have any questions?
Basically, as far as I see in the chat, someone's asked about, Jim's asked about whether it's self-guided or if I hired any guides or anything. So I was just doing the guiding. Usually I've just done a lot of independent trips to South America to pick up the birds, basically, is sort of how I've learned them. Yeah, I've gone to Ecuador. This was actually only my second time in Ecuador, but I had picked up the birds pretty well, I think, the first time. And there's also a lot of overlap with Colombia and Peru, which I've also done a couple of times each. So, yeah.
So we had an independent guide when we went to see the ground cuckoo who was leading us through that area. So there will be times where we have another guide.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Refugio and El Paz as well.
Yes.
A lot of the sites that require guides, you have someone showing you the birds. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then for the roadside birding and all of that, of course, you don't.
And Ben's excellent at IDing and getting you on all of those amazing tanagers and all the incredible looking birds.
I think we managed what was it in the end? We had 436 species.
Yes, we did.
12 days. So yeah.
And so only a few of those are North American species we would normally see in the summer, in the spring when they're migrating through the Swainson's thrushes, the Canada warbler. And then there were a few rock pigeons, house sparrows, but mostly birds we'd never see anywhere near North America. And that was amazing.
All right.
Yeah. Well, you know what? You know how to get a hold of Ben. I think you can get a hold of him through the link that he shared in the chat.
Yeah.
And thank you so much, Ben. It was fabulous to relive the trip and to share it with everyone. And we all wish you all the best good fortune in your guiding business going forward too.
Thank you very
And
much.
I hope to travel with you again for sure.
Thank you.
So
Thank you, everyone. All right.
thanks so much, Ben. Good luck
Hopefully-
on your big day.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm excited. Gotta drive to Texas now.
Go drive to Texas.